There are disasters that arrive with warning. Floods build slowly. Droughts announce themselves through weeks of dry heat. But locusts give no such notice. One morning the sky is clear. The next, it is gone, replaced by a living cloud so dense it blocks out sunlight, so vast it stretches from one horizon to the other, and so loud the sound of wings beating together carries for kilometers before a single insect lands. What follows is total erasure. Fields that took months of work and years of investment are stripped bare in a matter of hours. Not damaged, not reduced, gone. The soil left behind looks as though nothing ever grew there, as though an entire farming season simply never existed. This is what a locust swarm does. And for thousands of years, there has been no satisfying answer for how to stop it. A single female locust lays between 150 and 200 eggs at a time. Under the right conditions, populations multiply so fast that within weeks, a handful of insects becomes a swarm of billions. One swarm covering just 1 square kilometer can consume enough food in a single day to feed 35,000 people. And in the worst outbreaks, there are never just one swarm. In East Africa, infestations have wiped out over 40,000 tons of grain in Ethiopia alone, destroyed nearly 250,000 acres of farmland in Somalia, and cut harvests across Kenya by up to 15% in a single season. The ancient world knew this terror well. The Bible recorded locusts as the 8th plague of Egypt, a darkness descending on the land and stripping it of everything living. Thousands of years later, the catastrophe still returns, bigger, faster, and carrying the same devastating result. The remarkable thing is not that locusts are destructive. It is that across all of recorded human history, no civilization has ever truly stopped them. When a locust outbreak begins, governments respond the way they always have. Aircraft take off at dawn. Chemicals rain down over hundreds of square kilometers of farmland. Ground crews fan across the landscape. Farmers in desperation sometimes burn their own fields, accepting the loss of their crops rather than watching swarms consume every last stalk. The spending runs into the hundreds of millions of dollars. The effort is enormous. The determination is genuine, and yet the locusts keep coming. The reason is not a failure of will. It is something more fundamental. Locusts do not stay in one place long enough to be destroyed. A swarm can travel more than 150 kilometers in a single day, crossing deserts and oceans and national borders without slowing. The moment one region brings an outbreak under some degree of control, new swarms erupt somewhere else. The cycle simply moves on, and the cost of fighting it keeps accumulating. Chemicals spread across millions of hectares of agricultural land. Soils gradually weakened by repeated pesticide exposure. Ecosystems slowly losing the biological balance they once held. In 2020, one of the worst locust crises in modern history swept out of the Arabian Peninsula, cutting through Yemen, Ethiopia, and Kenya, before rolling deep into the African continent. Scientists estimated individual swarms covering hundreds of square kilometers, each containing up to 80 billion insects. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend, and the tools used to fight them were the same tools that had failed every time before. China had its own memories of this. Major infestations swept through Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang in the early 2000s, triggering massive aerial spray campaigns across tens of thousands of square kilometers. For years, China fought the same battle everyone else was fighting, and like everyone else, it never quite won. Then, somewhere in the exhaustion of that long campaign, a different question began to form. What if the way this had always been approached was the actual problem? The shift in thinking did not arrive dramatically. It emerged slowly from a growing awareness of something that had always been true, but rarely acknowledged. Locusts are extraordinary sources of protein. Gram for gram, they carry protein levels comparable to beef. They require almost no water to raise. They need no grazing land. They produce virtually no methane. And they reproduce at a rate that no traditional livestock operation can approach. A single generation reaches full maturity in 30 to 45 days. Cattle take years to reach the same point. For a country feeding more than 1 billion people, where food security has always been treated as a matter of national strategy, this nutritional profile was not a curiosity. It was an opening. China also had something that most of the world lacked when confronting this idea: a culinary culture in which insects have been a recognized food source for thousands of years. Not a novelty, not survival eating. A genuine familiar ingredient woven into traditional cooking across multiple regions. That combination, an urgent protein challenge, a unique nutritional profile, and a cultural readiness to receive it, was enough to begin the conversation. The swarms that once triggered emergency response were starting to look like something else entirely. A mobile, self-reproducing source of free protein descending from the sky. What followed began quietly in the northern agricultural provinces, Shandong, Henan, Inner Mongolia. Facilities started appearing that looked nothing like the aerial spray operations of earlier decades. Rows of fine mesh enclosures arranged like miniature industrial complexes. Climate-controlled environments where temperature was held steadily between 30 and 35 degrees Celsius and humidity maintained between 60 and 70%. Conditions designed to recreate the warmth of a permanent summer and hold the insect life cycle at its fastest possible pace. The floors inside each enclosure are layered with sand and sawdust to support reproduction. Lighting cycles are controlled. Feeding schedules are precise. Every variable that once made locusts unpredictable in the wild is managed with the same discipline applied to any modern livestock operation. The result is a production system that functions nothing like traditional farming. Densities reach thousands of individuals per square meter. Multiple batches are harvested from the same facility every single year, and the overhead required to run these operations is a fraction of what cattle or pork production demands. No vast tracts of grazing land, no enormous water supply, no methane emissions feeding into the atmosphere. When conditions inside the enclosures are adjusted, temperature lowered, lighting shifted, the locusts naturally cluster together. Workers move through the facility, collecting them into large containers in a process that is calm, efficient, and entirely repeatable. What was once a frantic chase across open countryside has become a standardized harvest cycle inside a controlled building. Fresh locusts in China currently sell for between $8 and $12 per kilogram. For farmers operating these facilities, that figure represents something that no disaster management campaign ever could. Stable, predictable income from an insect that the rest of the world is still trying to eliminate. After harvest, the locusts move into processing facilities where every step takes place inside a closed, sterile environment. The first stage is cleaning, and it is considerably more sophisticated than it sounds. Automated vibrating tanks filled with circulating water are combined with ultrasonic waves and rotating stainless steel drums engineered to remove dust, sand, residue, and the natural oil coating on the outer shell without damaging the physical structure of the insect. No torn wings, no broken legs. Clean product that meets food-grade standards before it proceeds any further down the line. Low-pressure cold air systems then remove surface moisture without thermal shock. In more advanced facilities, automated camera inspection systems scan each individual and remove anything that does not meet quality standards before the batch continues. The locusts that emerge from this stage are no longer pests. They are a clean protein ingredient, treated with the same rigor applied to any other food product entering a modern processing chain. Some move directly into culinary production. Dropped into hot oil, they turn a deep golden color within minutes, their shells crisping tight, their legs curling outward like the simplest, most satisfying kind of snack food. A dusting of chili salt or green pepper. No elaborate preparation. The flavor carries something almost elemental, a hint of grass, a trace of warm grain, a texture that surprises people who encounter it for the first time, and tends to hold their attention long after the plate is empty. Others are ground into protein powder and incorporated into nutritional supplements, high-protein food products, and specialty items moving through premium food markets both domestically and internationally. But the most significant volume does not end up on dinner plates. It moves into animal feed. In agricultural regions across China, frog farms, duck operations, and commercial poultry facilities have quietly become the largest customers for locust protein. The nutritional case is straightforward. Protein content can exceed 60%. Natural amino acid profiles support faster growth, stronger gut health, and reduced reliance on antibiotics. For livestock operations where feed cost represents one of the largest ongoing expenses, the economics are immediate and difficult to ignore. Feed costs fall, growth rates improve, meat quality becomes measurably better. And in a global market where the price of fish meal and soy continues to climb, Locust protein offers an alternative that is not only nutritionally competitive, but produced domestically without the supply chain exposure that imported ingredients carry. Commercial frog farms and large-scale poultry operations are now forming direct supply agreements with Locust breeding facilities, creating closed, integrated chains where a former agricultural disaster becomes a regular input in modern livestock production. The pest that once required aircraft and chemical campaigns to contain is now being ordered by the truckload. Once you understand what is happening inside China's Locust supply chain, the story becomes impossible to keep contained to one country. The global population is on course to exceed 9.7 billion people by 2050. Demand for meat, eggs, and seafood is projected to increase by nearly 70% compared to today. Traditional livestock production is already operating near the limits of what land and water systems can sustain. Cattle farming alone requires thousands of liters of water per kilogram of meat produced. Global livestock already occupies close to 80% of all agricultural land, while supplying less than 20% of the calories humanity consumes. The sector is also a significant source of methane emissions, accelerating climate change. The arithmetic of the conventional system simply does not work at the scale required. Insect protein converts feed into usable nutrition several times more efficiently than cattle or pigs. It places almost no pressure on land or water systems. It produces negligible emissions, and it can be scaled using industrial infrastructure that already exists. What was once considered a fringe idea is now the subject of serious research programs in Europe, the United States, and Japan. International agricultural organizations have begun formally categorizing insects as among the most sustainable food sources available for the coming decades. The conversation has moved from curiosity to necessity. China's locust industry is not ahead of the curve on this question. It arrived at the answer first because it had been living with the problem the longest. There is something worth pausing on in the larger arc of what happened here. For thousands of years, the relationship between humanity and natural threats has followed a single script: identify the threat, deploy every available resource to destroy it, repeat indefinitely. Locusts were sprayed with chemicals until the chemicals lost effectiveness. Feral pests were trapped and hunted in cycles that never resolved the underlying problem. Agricultural threats were met with force, and the force was always expensive and never final. The locust model inverts that logic entirely. Rather than fighting the traits that made these insects so dangerous, that explosive reproduction rate, that extreme adaptability, that capacity for exponential growth, China built a production system that uses all of those traits as advantages. Rapid reproduction becomes a harvesting cycle. Adaptability becomes resilience in a controlled environment. Exponential growth becomes output volume. Nature stops being the adversary on the other side of the field. It becomes part of the production chain. And this shift is not staying inside one country's borders. Automated insect farming operations are scaling in the Netherlands and Germany. Alternative protein systems built around insect biomass are attracting investment across North America. Circular agriculture models incorporating insect feed loops are being piloted across parts of Asia. A new framework for thinking about biological threats is quietly spreading, not eliminating nature, not resisting it, understanding it well enough to redirect it. The sky that once turned black and sent farmers running is now, in parts of northern China, just the signal that the next harvest is ready. What changed was not the insect. It was the mind of the person looking up at it. If you want to keep exploring the technologies and transformations reshaping the modern world, like and follow so you never miss what comes next.